The thermometer outside reads -30 degrees Celsius. Inside this cave cabin carved into the mountainside, it's a steady 28 degrees. That's a 58-degree difference between survival and exposure, between warmth and the kind of cold that stops your heart in minutes. I'm about to take you through the longest night of winter, where one small mistake could mean everything. If you want to see how thermal mass fire management and old-world building techniques can hold the line against a deep freeze that's locking down an entire valley, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens in the next 12 hours is something most people will never experience. And you're going to see every decision, every problem, and every solution as it unfolds in real time. The sun dropped behind the western ridge about 2 hours ago, and the temperature has been falling ever since. I've lived in this cave cabin for 3 winters now, and I can read the signs. The sky went that particular shade of pale gray blue just before dusk, the kind that tells you the air is bone dry and the cold is going to settle in hard. The wind shifted to the north around 4 in the afternoon, and by the time I brought in the last load of firewood, I could feel it cutting through my jacket like it wasn't even there. The forecast called for -20, maybe -25 overnight. But I've learned that the valley floor always goes colder than the predictions. That's why I built here, 30 feet up the slope, tucked into the south face of a granite outcrop with 10 feet of earth and rock above my head. The cave cabin isn't really a cave in the natural sense. I excavated back into the hillside, shored up the opening with timber framing, and extended out about 8 feet with log walls all chinked with moss and clay. The roof is a sandwich of logs, tar paper, sod, and stone, thick enough that snow sits on it all winter without melting, which is exactly what you want. That snow becomes part of the insulation. The back wall where I dug into the earth stays at a constant temperature, somewhere around 8 to 10 degrees Celsius year-round. That thermal mass is the backbone of this whole system. In summer, it keeps things cool. In winter, it's a heat battery that never fully discharges. Right now, the fire in the wood stove is burning steady, not roaring, just a controlled burn with the damper set to about 40%. The stove is a small cast iron box, barely big enough for 18-inch logs, positioned in the center of the space, so the heat radiates in all directions. The stovepipe runs up through the roof with a double-wall insulated section where it passes through the combustible materials, and I cleaned it 2 weeks ago, so there's no creosote buildup to worry about. The key to keeping 28 degrees inside when it's -30 outside isn't blasting heat. It's preventing heat loss and managing moisture. Every breath I take, every pot of water I heat, every damp piece of clothing adds humidity to the air, and if that moisture condenses on the cold surfaces, I've got problems. Ice inside is just as dangerous as ice outside because it tells you your vapor barrier is failing. I sealed this place tight. The door is 2 inches of solid pine with a wool blanket nailed to the inside and a leather draft skirt around the frame. The single window, no bigger than a sheet of paper, has 3 panes separated by air gaps, and a wood shutter I can close if things get desperate. But airtight means you have to bring in fresh air or you'll suffocate, or worse, you'll fill the space with carbon monoxide from the stove. That's the killer nobody sees coming. I've got 2 ventilation systems running. The primary is a 4-inch metal pipe that brings air in low, near the floor on the south wall. Cold air sinks, so it comes in, gets warmed by the stove, and rises. The exhaust is passive, a 2-inch gap at the peak of the roof that lets the warm, moist air escape without creating a draft. The balance is delicate. Too much fresh air and I'm heating the outside. Too little, and I'm gambling with my life. The wind is picking up now, and I can hear it working through the trees on the ridge above. It's a low moan at first, then it sharpens into something closer to a whistle when it finds the gaps in the canopy. The fire responds, pulling harder on the stovepipe, and I watch the flames lean toward the air intake. That's a good sign. It means the draft is strong, the chimney is warm, and the combustion is clean. I add 1 more log, a split piece of birch that's been drying under the eaves since last spring. Birch burns hot and fast, but I don't want fast right now. I want coals. Coals are the foundation of long-term heat. They don't produce the dramatic flames that make you feel warm, but they radiate steady infrared energy that soaks into the mass of the stove, the stone hearth, and even the earth walls. By midnight, I want a bed of coals 6 inches deep so I can feed the fire without thinking about it every 20 minutes. Outside, The valley is starting to freeze solid. I step to the window and wipe the condensation away with my sleeve, careful not to smear it, and look down the slope. The creek that runs through the bottom is still moving, but barely. I can see the white edges where the ice is building out from the banks. By morning it'll be locked. The spruce trees are loaded with snow from yesterday's storm, and their branches are already sagging under the weight. When the temperature drops this fast, the snow doesn't slide off, it freezes in place, and if the wind gets strong enough, those branches will start snapping. I've heard it before. Sounds like rifle shots echoing through the forest. It's unnerving if you're not expecting it, and it's a reminder that everything out there is under stress. I check my water situation. I've got 2 5-gallon jugs inside, both filled yesterday from the spring about 100 yards uphill. The spring won't freeze because it's fed by groundwater, but the surface flow will, and if I don't collect water before that happens, I'm hiking in the dark with a headlamp and a bucket, which is exactly the kind of mistake that turns into a story about frostbite. I also have a pot on the stove, melting snow for washing. Snow is easy to bring inside, but it's a terrible source of drinking water because it takes so much energy to melt. 1 pot of snow yields maybe 2 cups of water, and you've burned through a log to get it. The spring water is the foundation. The snow is the backup. My food for the night is simple. I've got a pot of stew that's been simmering since late afternoon, mostly root vegetables, dried beans, and a bit of smoked meat. It's not fancy, but it's dense with calories, and calories are what keep you warm when the outside world is trying to pull the heat out of your body. I also have bread, baked this morning in a Dutch oven set right on the coals, and a block of hard cheese that won't spoil in the cold. I eat slowly, chewing each bite, letting the warmth spread through my chest and stomach. Eating is part of the heating strategy. Digestion generates heat, and on a night like this, every degree counts. The light inside is soft and orange coming from the stove and a single kerosene lamp hanging from a beam near the door. I don't like electric lights out here. They're harsh, they drain batteries, and they don't produce heat. The kerosene lamp gives off a surprising amount of warmth for its size, and the light has a quality that makes the space feel smaller and safer. I can see every detail. The rough texture of the log walls, the clay chinking that's cracked in a few places but still holding, the row of tools hanging on pegs, the stack of firewood against the back wall, cut and split to exact lengths so they fit the stove without wasted space. Everything here has a purpose, and everything is within arm's reach. It's 8 o'clock now, and the temperature outside has dropped to -22. I know because I stepped out 10 minutes ago to check the thermometer mounted on a post near the door, and the cold hit me like a physical force. It's the kind of cold that makes your nose hairs freeze on the first inhale, that makes your eyes water and the tears freeze on your cheeks before they can fall. I was out there for maybe 30 seconds, just long enough to scan the area with my headlamp and confirm that nothing had changed, and when I came back inside, the warmth felt like a wall I had to push through. The contrast is disorienting. Out there, the air is so cold it doesn't feel like air anymore. It feels like a substance thick and hostile, something that wants to get inside your lungs and freeze you from the core. In here, it's shirt-sleeve weather. I could take a nap on the bunk without a blanket and be perfectly comfortable. But I'm not going to take a nap because the night is just starting, and the temperature is going to keep falling. I know how this works. The coldest part of the night is the hour before dawn, when the earth has radiated away all the heat it stored during the day and the sun hasn't yet started the recovery. That's when it'll hit -30, maybe worse if the wind dies down and the cold air pools in the valley. I've seen -35 here once 3 years ago, and that was the night I learned what real cold does to a building. Every piece of wood contracted, every nail groaned. The door frame pulled away from the logs by a 1/4 inch, and I had to stuff rags into the gap to stop the draft. The stovepipe rattled like someone was shaking it. And the fire wanted to go out because the draft was so strong it was pulling heat up the chimney faster than the wood could burn. I'm not going to let that happen tonight. I've learned. I've adapted. I check the stove again, open the door, and look at the coals. They're glowing deep red, almost white in the center, and the bed is building nicely. I add 2 more pieces of wood, both oak this time, dense and slow burning. Oak doesn't light easily, but once it's going, it holds heat for hours. I close the door, Adjust the damper to about 30% and watch the flames settle. The fire doesn't need me to babysit it. The fire needs me to trust the system I've built. The wind outside is no longer moaning, it's howling. I can hear it slam into the north side of the cabin, and I feel the pressure shift inside, just slightly, enough that my ears pop. That's the fresh air intake doing its job, equalizing the pressure so the wind doesn't force smoke back down the chimney. I walk over to the intake pipe and hold my hand near the opening. Cold air is pouring in, fast and steady, and I can feel it spreading across the floor before the stove sucks it up. This is the moment when a lot of people make a mistake. They feel that cold air coming in, and they want to block it. They stuff a rag in the pipe or close the damper all the way, and then they sit back and congratulate themselves on keeping the heat in. And then, an hour later, they're dead. Carbon monoxide is colorless, odorless, and it binds to your hemoglobin 200 times more effectively than oxygen. You don't feel it. You just get tired, lie down, and never wake up. I've got a battery-powered CO detector mounted on the wall near my bunk, and I check it every night before I sleep. Right now it reads 0. That's where it needs to stay. It's 9:30, and the valley is fully dark. There's no moon tonight, just stars so bright they look like chips of ice scattered across the sky. I step outside again, just for a moment, and the cold is worse than before. -25, I'd guess, maybe -26. The wind has died down, which should be a relief, but it's not. Wind mixes the air, prevents the coldest layer from settling. When the wind stops, the cold sinks and it concentrates. I can see my breath as a thick cloud, and it hangs in the air for a moment before drifting down like smoke. The trees are silent now, frozen in place, and the creek is gone. I can't see it, but I know it's there, locked under a sheet of ice that's getting thicker by the hour. The only sound is the creak of the snow under my boots, a sharp squeak that tells me the moisture has been wrung out of it. Dry snow, cold snow, the kind that doesn't pack, the kind that slides off a shovel like sand. Back inside, I close the door and drop the wooden bar into the brackets. The bar isn't for security, it's for wind. On a night like this, the wind can hit the door hard enough to rattle it open if it's not latched properly. I check the wool blanket, make sure it's still covering the cracks, and then I move to the window. The shutter is open, but I'm thinking about closing it. The window is a weak point. 3 panes or not. Glass conducts heat faster than wood, and every bit of warmth that escapes through that window is warmth I have to replace with firewood. But I leave it open for now because I want to be able to see out, to monitor the conditions, to know if something changes. Visibility is information, and information is survival. I sit on the edge of the bunk and pull off my boots. My feet are warm, but my socks are slightly damp from the earlier trip outside. Damp is dangerous. Damp means heat loss. I hang the socks on a line near the stove where the air is warm but not hot, and I pull on a dry pair. I've got 6 pairs of wool socks, and I rotate through them constantly, drying the damp ones, wearing the dry ones, never letting any of them stay wet for long. It's a small thing, but small things add up. Frostbite starts with small mistakes. The cabin feels solid right now, but I'm listening for changes. I'm listening for the sound of wood contracting, for the crack of a log splitting under the pressure of the cold, for the rattle of the stovepipe, for the hiss of a draft I didn't expect. Every building talks to you if you pay attention, and this one is no different. I hear the occasional pop from the stove as a pocket of moisture in the wood turns to steam and explodes. I hear the soft rush of air through the intake pipe. I hear the creak of the beam above my head as it adjusts to the temperature. These are normal sounds. These are expected. What I'm listening for are the abnormal sounds, the ones that tell me something is failing. It's 10:15, and I'm starting to notice something. The humidity inside is rising. I can feel it in the air, a slight heaviness, and when I breathe out, my breath is visible even inside the cabin. That's not good. It means the moisture from my cooking, my breathing, and the drying socks is accumulating faster than the ventilation can remove it. I walk over to the peak vent and hold my hand near it. The air is flowing out, but slowly, maybe too slowly. The outside air is so cold and dense that it's not rising as fast as it should. I need to increase the exhaust, but I can't just cut a bigger hole in the roof. I need to encourage the flow. I grab a small piece of birch bark from the kindling pile and light it in the stove. I carry it over to the peak vent, still burning, and hold it up near the opening. The smoke is sucked out immediately, pulling the warm, moist air with it. That's better. I let the bark burn down to my fingers, drop it into a metal can, and watch the vent for a minute. The flow is stronger now, and I can feel the slight draft pulling across the room. The humidity will drop, the condensation will stop, and the cabin will stabilize. It's a small adjustment, but it's the kind of thing that separates comfort from misery. By 11, the temperature outside has hit -28. I know because I made another quick trip out to check the thermometer, and the cold was so intense it felt like my skin was burning. I was out there for less than 20 seconds, and when I came back in, my fingers were numb and my face felt like it had been slapped. I stood by the stove for 5 minutes, holding my hands over the top, waiting for the blood to return. It hurt, that prickly, needle-like pain of circulation coming back, but it was a good hurt. It meant nothing was damaged. It meant I was still okay. The wind is back, and it's fiercer than before. It's coming in gusts now, slamming into the cabin and then dying away, leaving an eerie silence before the next one hits. I can hear the trees on the ridge, and they're starting to crack. The first one goes off like a gunshot, sharp and loud, and I flinch even though I was expecting it. A few seconds later, there's another and then another. The branches are failing, loaded with ice and snow, stressed beyond their capacity. It's a dangerous time to be in the forest, but I'm not in the forest. I'm 30 feet into the hillside with 10 feet of earth and rock above me, and nothing short of an avalanche is going to reach me here. I check the firewood stack. I've got maybe 20 pieces left inside, enough to get through the night if I'm careful. There's more outside, stacked against the south wall under a tarp, but I'm not going out there again unless I have to. Every trip outside is a risk, a loss of heat, a chance for something to go wrong. I'd rather ration what I have inside and deal with restocking in the morning when the sun is up and the temperature has started to recover. The stove is still burning steady, but I'm noticing something. The draft is pulling harder than it should be. The flames are leaning too far toward the air intake, and the wood is burning faster than I want. I walk over to the damper and adjust it down to 20%, choking the fire slightly, slowing the burn. The flames settle, the wood glows instead of blazing, and the coals start to build again. It's a balancing act, always a balancing act, and you have to stay ahead of it or you end up chasing problems all night. At midnight, I realize I've made a mistake. The fresh air intake is pulling too much cold air, and the floor near the door is colder than it should be. I can feel it through my socks, a chill that's creeping up from the ground. I should have throttled the intake when I throttled the stove damper, but I didn't, and now the cold air is pooling instead of mixing. I grab a piece of canvas and rig a simple baffle over the intake pipe, angling it so the incoming air is directed toward the stove instead of spreading across the floor. It's a crude fix, but it works. Within 10 minutes, the cold spot is gone, and the temperature near the floor is back to where it should be. This is the kind of near mistake that can spiral if you don't catch it early. Cold air on the floor means cold feet. Cold feet mean you put on more socks. More socks mean damp socks. Damp socks mean frostbite. And frostbite means you're in trouble. Out here, alone, trouble compounds fast. There's no calling for help, no emergency room down the road. There's only you, your skills, and your ability to see problems before they become disasters. It's 1 in the morning, and the cabin is holding at 28 degrees. The outside temperature is -29, and I know it's going to drop 1 more degree before the night is over. The stove is a steady presence now, a red glow behind the cast iron door, and the coals are deep and hot. I fed it twice in the last hour, small pieces of oak and ash, just enough to keep the bed alive. I'm not trying to heat the place anymore. I'm just trying to maintain. I lie on the bunk, fully clothed, with a wool blanket pulled up to my chest. I'm not sleeping, just resting, keeping one ear tuned to the sounds of the cabin and the storm outside. The wind is relentless now, a constant roar that shakes the walls and rattles the stovepipe. I can feel the pressure shifts, the way the cabin inhales and exhales with each gust. It's like being inside a living thing, something that breathes and flexes and holds the line against the cold. At 2, I hear a sound I don't like. It's a sharp crack followed by a groan, and it's coming from the roof. I sit up, grab my headlamp, and shine it at the ceiling. I don't see anything obvious, no sagging, no gaps, but I heard it, and I know what it means. The logs are contracting, pulling away from each other, and the gaps are getting bigger. I watch for a minute, listening, and I hear it again. Crack. Groan. It's not structural, not yet, but it's a warning. I need to stay warm, keep the inside temperature stable, because if the cabin gets too cold, the contraction will accelerate, and then I'll have drafts I can't seal. I get up, add another log to the stove, and check the damper. It's where I left it, 20%, and the draft is still strong. I walk the perimeter of the cabin holding my hand near the walls, feeling for cold spots, for drafts, for any sign that the envelope is failing. The back wall, the earth wall, is cool to the touch but not cold. That's normal. The log walls are solid, no drafts that I can find. The door is tight, the blanket is doing its job. The window is the weak point as always, but it's holding. I consider closing the shutter, but I decide against it. I want to see the morning when it comes. By 3, the wind has started to die down again, and that's when the temperature hits -30. I don't need to go outside to know. I can feel it in the way the cabin responds, the way every surface seems to radiate cold, the way the air near the window shimmers with frost. The valley is locked now, completely frozen, a landscape of ice and silence. The creek is gone. The trees are still. Even the wind has given up, leaving nothing but the cold. I sit by the stove, feeding it small pieces of birch, keeping the coals alive. I'm not burning through the firewood as fast as I thought I would, which is good because I don't want to go outside to get more. I have maybe 10 pieces left inside, and that's enough to get me through to dawn. The key now is patience. Don't overfeed the fire. Don't let the coals die. Don't open the door unless you absolutely have to. Just wait. Just hold. At 4, I notice the condensation on the window has turned to frost, a delicate pattern of ferns and crystals that spreads across the glass. It's beautiful in a way, but it's also a sign that the outside cold is winning, pushing through the 3 panes, reaching into the cabin. I watch the frost grow, and I think about the thermal dynamics at play. The inside air is warm and moist. The glass is cold. When they meet, the moisture freezes. It's physics, simple and unavoidable, but it's also a reminder that there's no such thing as perfect insulation. The cold always finds a way in. Always. I make myself a cup of tea, boiling water in a small pot on the stove and pouring it over a handful of dried herbs I collected last summer. The steam rises, filling the cabin with a faint, earthy smell, and I cup my hands around the mug, feeling the warmth seep into my fingers. This is the moment, the quiet hour before dawn, when the night is at its darkest and coldest, when survival feels like nothing more than waiting. I sip the tea slowly, letting it warm me from the inside, and I think about the valley outside, about the trees locked in ice, about the creek that won't flow until spring, about the cold that's pressing down on everything like a weight. At 5, the cabin temperature drops to 26 degrees. It's the first time all night that it's gone below 28, and I know why. The fire has burned down to coals, and I haven't fed it enough. I add 3 pieces of wood, open the damper to 40%, and watch the flames come back to life. Within 20 minutes, the temperature is back to 28, and I close the damper again. It's a reminder that you can't coast, not on a night like this. You have to stay engaged, stay aware, stay ahead of the curve. By 5:30, the first hint of light appears in the east, a pale gray glow that barely registers against the darkness. I stand at the window and watch it grow, spreading across the sky like a stain. The frost on the glass is so thick now that I can barely see through it, but I can make out the shapes of the trees, the line of the ridge, the valley below. Everything is white, frozen, locked in place. The temperature outside is still -30, maybe -31, and it won't start to recover until the sun is fully up and the air begins to move again. I step outside at 6, just as the sun breaks over the ridge, and the cold is so intense, it takes my breath away. -31 degrees, the thermometer confirms, and the air is so dry it crackles. The valley is a frozen wasteland, every surface coated with frost, every shadow a deep blue, every highlight a blinding white. The creek is invisible under a sheet of ice. The trees are statues, and the smoke from my stovepipe rises straight up in a column before bending away to the east. I stand there for a moment, feeling the cold press against my face, and then I go back inside, close the door, and drop the bar into place. Inside, the cabin is still 28 degrees. The stove is still burning. The walls are still solid. The roof is still holding. I made it through. The night is over, and the valley may be frozen solid, but this space, this cave cabin carved into the hillside, has held the line. 58 degrees of difference, maintained through the coldest night of the year, with nothing but earth, rock, wood, fire, and the knowledge of how to use them. If you've stayed with me this far, if you've watched the temperature drop and the night unfold, if you've seen what it takes to survive when the outside world is trying to kill you, then you understand what's possible when you build right, plan ahead, and respect the environment. That subscribe button is still there, and if this story meant something to you, if it taught you something or made you think about survival in a new way, then clicking it is how you tell me you want more. Because the winter isn't over, the cold will come back, and there are more nights like this ahead. I'll be here, in this cave cabin, holding the line, and if you want to see what happens next, I'll see you in the next one.